This is Sybert signing into Red Alert 3 on the map Fire Island, spawning as our blue Empire in the bottom left side. He is playing random. He is from teammates. He is Dankal. And his opponent in the top right side as the Cyan Allies, he is YuiYui. This is the grand finals of the Red Alert 3 Christmas tournament. $420 in the prize pool, 5 $20 random drawings. And I did live stream and live cast these games. You can check those out. They are over on Twitch. But I am going to be bringing you the grand finals and some other random matches from throughout the tournament for YouTube in a little bit better quality. So hopefully things will be looking quite nice. And I do want to mention this is a best of 7 series, but since the tournament was double elimination, and since we were a little bit pressed for time at the end, we were getting to the point where YuiYui, it was pretty late for him. He had to go, but he still wanted to finish the series. So he and Dankal, who, I mean, it's like, I think 4 or 5 a.m. at this point for Dankal. So Dankal wanted to go to bed as well. And so they both agreed that instead of playing 2 best of 7s, if Dankal wins, that they would play a best of 7, but YuiYui starts with 1 point. So the score is already 1-0 in YuiYui's favor, and YuiYui is actually going to be going for a dual racks 1 refinery turret push. And this is he's basically just wanting to blitz the game and get it over quickly as possible. As you can see, he's pumped out a fair number of peacekeepers, but he's also mixed in javelin troopers, which is definitely a crucial part of this build and of this plan. Dankal is going to be playing random. He did draw Empire, and both of these players have grabbed their oil derricks, and Dankal now knows completely what is going on. When you see just 1 refinery like that, you know exactly what is happening. He is going to be attaching his burst drone. Definitely a good idea there. I mean, if he absolutely wanted to, he could produce another 3 or 4 burst drones to go ahead and take down that ore collector and force YuiYui to have to rebuild it. But is YuiYui really going to be needing the income? That is what we're going to be seeing, because it will be coming down to the positioning of these 2 players. These are going to be a first really low eco game, and by the way, this is actually a rematch. The first game on Fire Island was voided just because there was the use of a bug. It was an unintentional bug, which is why YuiYui was not disqualified, but we did have to void that game because, I mean, you know, it's in the middle of a stream. We can't exactly stop to run a full investigation to see how intentional or how damaging that bug was. We had to make a call on the fly, and that was probably the most fair thing that we could do. YuiYui is going to be deploying his Conyard, but he also did take out the refinery of Dankal, which is, of course, going to be very good news for YuiYui. Not so good news for Dankal. Dankal also going to be losing his power plant and potentially a second refinery. YuiYui trying to get the crush on some of these Imperial warriors. Dankal not choosing to engage. Instead, he is going to be able to actually capture his opponent's refinery. As you can see, the engineer bugged out a little bit there. And he doesn't quite get the Prospector, but the Prospector is going to continue mining there, and Dankal is going to be establishing himself a 3rd refinery. Well, it would have been a 3rd refinery, but now it is technically his 2nd refinery in the north. That's just going to be giving a nice spread to Dankal. And Dankal is going to have to be sure that he micros properly if he wants to continue to put damage on this MCV, and at the same time keep all of his Imperial warriors alive. The burst drone is going to be slowing down that MCV just a little bit there, and YuiYui is now down severely in that income, but he does have this power plant out on the water, so even if he loses his MCV, as long as he maintains his army, he's still got at least somewhat of a chance. Dankal is going to be running his MCV, desperately trying to avoid that, and YuiYui doing his best to block off the MCV with walls, being super annoying there. As you can see, Dankal actually pulled his army quite a ways, and he is going to have to go ahead and reposition there. He's not wanting to engage just yet. He was able to snipe down a couple of dogs, which is nice to pick those off from the rest of the army, and it looks like YuiYui is going to be letting that Prospector die. There's not a whole lot else he can do with it at this time, unless he really ends up getting an extra refinery up, but at the point it's going to be coming with a Prospector anyways. However, the Conyard for Dankal is up and running. YuiYui going to be throwing down a multi-gunner turret. He does have enough power and energy for that. However, this naval yard is going to be able to just barely escape. As you can see there, with hardly any HP at all, the MCV is going to be forced back as well. YuiYui with that multi-gunner turret going for a nice move, but Dankal knows that pretty much every single unit that YuiYui has is ground-based only. So as long as he stays out on the water, it's going to be all right for Dankal. Couple of tank busters which were over here ended up getting a little bit crushed there by that prospector. As you can see, Dankal has rebuilt the prospector. He's got his mining going on, but the thing is, can he actually get the production structures up to deal with his opponent? One thing that he could do is try to sneak a barracks around, but as long as YuiYui has got some nice scouting going on, then he's going to be able to clean up that barracks. But Dankal could potentially send a barracks like, you know, over here somewhere, and then try to get something set up there, maybe pump out some tank busters, additional Imperial Warriors, anything like that. YuiYui is going to be potentially able to set up a nice flank attack here. Of course, he needs to keep the Javelin Troopers protected, because those are really his only anti-building sort of DPS. Riptides and Yari mini-subs are going to be engaging over here. However, it looks like YuiYui is just kind of focusing on that Imperial Docks. Isn't necessarily the best choice. Maybe, maybe not. That is the YuiYui's currently, that is Dankal's currently only production structure. And I mean, of course, the Yari mini-subs can just suicide on the Riptides, so are you going to really accomplish anything by shooting the Yari mini-subs? Probably not, especially in that sort of situation where you end up losing the Riptide. But of course, YuiYui does drop down an additional multi-gunner turret. He might be able to get some shots off, but these two Yari mini-subs are going to be able to finish it off pretty darn quickly. One of them suicides right there and takes out that multi-gunner turret. Not a whole lot of damage was able to be done, and YuiYui has been defeated. So now, even though YuiYui is the only one who's actually gotten a kill there, or Dankal is the one who has only actually won a game there, they're at the same number of points, and we are going to be jumping into game number 2. Remember, this is a best-of-7 series, but we are going to be seeing at maximum 6 replays, and that is, of course, because that first point and the double elimination format. So that will do it. Dankal with a kind of commanding performance. It's kind of weird to say anything about these replays just because of how wonky that game was, and game number 1, just 2 racks, 1 refinery push, and then of course Dankal just has to react. He doesn't have his Mecha Bay up in that time, he may not really be used to playing Empire, so there's a lot of things that he has to just kind of think of on the fly and just make up as he goes along, and basically just try to react to what his opponent is doing. And that will do it for game number 1. Game number 2 is coming right up. And that takes us to Industrial Strength, spawning as the Cyan allies. In the bottom left side, we do have YuiYui, who has currently just lost the previous game. And to add everything up, his opponent in the northeast, he is as the Blue Empire, once again as random, he is mates Dankal. And it looks like he is going to be opening up Quad Dojo, which is not too uncommon on this map. A lot of allied players do like to open up dual barracks or dual racks, and then a lot of Empire players do open up with Quad Dojo. And then, of course, there's this great garage in the middle of the map, which may or may not make the difference in this game. Don't really remember. I know it made the difference in a number of games, but I don't know about this one in particular. We will have to wait and see. The first engineer is going to be out. And actually, it is going to be a no-ref turret push. And once again, YuiYui just wanted to blitz this game as well. Just basically get it over as quickly as possible. And I mean, we've seen strategies like this, but I mean, not usually in finals of tournaments, although it has happened before across multiple different games. But it does look like YuiYui is going to be marching on forward, and also he's grabbing with a second engineer, the oil derrick, and the garage. I almost decided to call it a garage there because I had a whole conversation about garage versus garage at one point, but that's a story for another time. However, we do have Imperial Warriors going to be popping out. They all will escape here, but will Dankal be able to hold off once again the push of YuiYui? He's got a fair number of infantry, but not necessarily enough to just straight up take down YuiYui, not when the MCV is there. I mean, you have to be really careful when you control with the MCV, well, with the MCV present, because you have to make sure that you're not making too many mistakes with your infantry and end up losing units. However, it does look like Dankal is going to be grabbing that, but also killing off the garage, which is also going to be important. We do have a lot of walls going to be coming down here for Dankal. He is going to be able to stop the MCV a little bit here, but as you can see, YuiYui is eventually just going to be able to break on through, and Dankal is going to be going for a third refinery. I don't know if I agree with this. I think he should have gone for Mecha Bay before that. or maybe MCV move and then either Naval Yard or Mecha Bay, because obviously YuiYui is coming in eventually and Dankal has nothing to stop him. He could try maybe like a bonsai charge to try to clear up a lot of these infantry, and that would potentially work, but at the same time he wants to clear the garage from the center of the map because that is going to be providing so many free repairs to YuiYui. It is almost kind of silly in a lot of games, like how much the free repairs actually end up helping. So as you can see, the wall off hasn't quite finished for either one of these refineries because Dankal had to wall off his front to stop YuiYui from getting in. So as a result, YuiYui is going to be able to take down the refineries quite easily. And as you can see, Laser Lock is going to make short work of those refineries, deciding to actually switch targeting a little bit there. Perhaps a mini micro mistake, but Dankal is going to be pulling off to the left side, and he has actually taken both of the oil derricks and cleared out the center garage. And he is going to go ahead and kill whatever is in YuiYui's main, but the problem is YuiYui only has a power plant, and that power plant is behind a wall. So unfortunately, those Imperial Warriors are not going to be able to do anything, but we do have YuiYui going to be throwing down his own oil derrick inside of the walls of his opponent, which is kind of nice for Dankal, because if he ever wants to come back through here, he can of course sell off these wall segments for access to that collector. So if YuiYui tried to wall that off, Dankal controls the other side of the walls, so he could just take care of that pretty easily. The Naval Yard does go down for YuiYui, and Dankal does have his third refinery up here and established. However, he is going to be on that low power mode most likely, or actually he might not be just yet, but he's going to be very close if he's not actually in that low power mode. And actually his MCV is just barely close enough to be targeted down by the Javelin Troopers, one of them fully heroic, another one is elite, and then I think the other two are just no veteran status. However, it looks like we do have the MCV of YuiYui going to be pushing on out, and again, he is going to be bringing up some additional naval units. Riptides are an excellent choice just because out on the water they do get the boost from the damage boost, rather, from the torpedoes, and it allows them to do extra damage. So YuiYui is going to be pushing forward. Dankal does control one refinery and two oil derricks, but is that actually going to be enough? He's going to have to make sure that he pays attention, because sometimes players will start assaulting something and then they'll kind of forget about their infantry down there while they're controlling somewhere else on the map, and then all of their units end up getting taken out. And that's, of course, a problem that all gamers do face, is how do you micro everywhere all the time perfectly, and sometimes you just can't. One Yari mini-sub is able to clear out one of the Riptides, but again, with the Naval Yard no longer here, YuiYui is not actually going to be having too much trouble breaking down this base with the help of the multi-gunner turret. Of course, he can sacrifice some of these Yari mini-subs, but it's like once you lose that one, you may have taken out one multi-gunner turret, but what's going to stop YuiYui from placing down an additional multi-gunner turret? Dankal, as you can see, with no production facilities and pretty limited eco, although eco definitely isn't his biggest problem, it's going to be hard for Dankal to actually get any units out on the field to really do anything about this army. We do have Javelin Troopers, Peacekeepers, and the like going to be doing battle with the oil derricks, clearing out one of them on the left side of the map, and then on the right side clearing out a second one. As you can see on the minimap, we do have one Yari mini-sub going to be running around, and I think that was an insurance policy from Dankal. He wanted to make sure that he got at least one fighting unit out, but he's actually in a really bad situation. I think he was hoping he could rebuild, maybe do something perhaps on the other side of the map and hold off YuiYui, but YuiYui is already going to be fairly well established with an MCV cell and some Vindicators. However, if Dankal can take out the airfield, then that will be pretty much it, because then it'll be it'll be Empire with an MCV versus just like a multi-gunner turret and the power plant, which is down here in the corner. And as long as the airfield does still stand and the Vindicators are able to reload, I mean, YuiYui basically just has infinite ammo, and it looks like the Riptide did go down, but so did that Yari mini-sub. That engineer staying so close to that airfield, and there gets sold off both the power plant and also gets sold off that multi-gunner turret, because of course without the power plant, low power mode will mean that that multi-gunner turret is completely useless. YuiYui is desperately trying to join together all of his Peacekeepers. As you can see, he's doing his best to hold off, but it's just really overwhelming numbers of Imperial Warriors for Dankal, and he is going to be able to break through the front lines there. A couple of extra Peacekeepers could have been rallied, but YuiYui pretty much has this game as long as he can hold on to that the airfield. However, Dankal, if he got like some crazy perfect crushes and somehow was able to take down the Vindicators with like mass burst drone, then he could potentially still do a lot of damage to YuiYui. But as long as YuiYui keeps that airfield out on the water where it can't be attacked by the infantry, and of course then burst drones are the only option. One burst drone is going to be making its way across the map, and Dankal might be able to do some damage with it, but when it's just one burst drone versus 2, 3, or even 4 Vindicators, it's going to be hard. Ooh, there's the sell-off and the kill of the engine. It's going to be hard for YuiYui to do anything about it. However, it looks like the burst drone is going to be attacking to that Vindicator. How much money does YuiYui actually have left? Because the thing is that if YuiYui can potentially, he's only got 700 credits, which isn't quite enough, and Dankal could potentially clean out the rest of these Vindicators, but it only takes like 3 bombing runs, maybe 4. Maybe it's 4. I think it's only 3 to take out, yeah, it's like 2.5 to take out a barracks. And with that Peacekeeper, he's actually going to be able to clear it out with even less than that. As you can see, the Imperial Warriors are desperately trying to run over here, but their Bonsai Charge may be a little bit too late. It's actually going to be extremely close there, as they do run out of the Bonsai Charge just before they reach the Peacekeeper. And now there's an Apollo out, which means the burst drones are going to be dealt with quite readily by YuiYui. Dankal trying to suicide a little bit there, but Dankal has been defeated. YuiYui is going to be gaining an additional point. So, that game, once again, it was a no-ref push. I believe it was a, yeah, it was a no-ref. It was like dual racks, 1 power plant, no-ref push that game. YuiYui, again, just blitzing straight up against Dankal. It ended up working out, not so much in the last game, but in this game, he was able to actually take down Dankal and gain himself another point. Game number 3 is coming right up. And game number 3 takes us to Battle Base Beta, spawning as the Blue Random Empire. Once again, he just lost a game, which kind of gave him a disadvantage. This is Mates Dankal. His opponent in the top right side as the Cyan Allies. He is wanting to end this series super duper quick. He is YuiYui. So we've got the dual racks going down from YuiYui. We've seen a 1 refinery push, and we've also seen a no refinery push. And based on these walls, it's looking like it's going to be a hidden power plant, which would indicate a no refinery push. There is going to be the power plant, and the pack-up of the MCV either means this is going to be a very fast first refinery somewhere else on the map, or he is going to be going for a no-ref push. So YuiYui is going to be getting a fair number of Peacekeepers out, pumping out as many as he can. Dankal at this point really should be expecting it. An additional power plant is going to be going down on the low ground, but this is definitely close enough to be shot by the Peacekeepers from on the ground. So we've got actually, I think, triple random empire in a row from Dankal, which, I mean, I don't know how he feels about that. He may be kind of enjoying it, he may not. But Imperial Warriors going to be massing up on the front line. Same with the Peacekeepers. They are going to be controlling the center of the map, which makes it difficult for Dankal to really know that this MCV is moving out until just now. But if he didn't know it was moving out, he should have definitely been able to guess that it's probably going to be moving out. The Imperial Warriors are going to be grabbing up the buildings on each side, which is going to be giving YuiYui or Dankal a nice defensive position. However, it looks like the Peacekeepers are going to be able to shred a couple of these barracks pretty darn quickly. The sell-off does indeed happen, and the Imperial Warrior is going to be off running into that building, and Dankal is going to be favored a little bit here in, well, in a one-to-one trade with the Peacekeepers and Imperial Warriors, but does that really matter? Again, economics is not the name of the game for YuiYui. Because he's pushing with his MCV this early, like a minute into the game, it can really upset things for Dankal. The third refinery is going to be going down. I think if either he needs to just get out a burst drone immediately to spot that and then stop his second refinery from being placed on the land, and then go ahead and just go second refinery directly out to the water. That would probably be the best move, so that he doesn't end up going 3 refinery when 2 of them are going to be cleaned up very quickly. Walls are going to be finished off, so no attempted blocking of walls here or anything like that. So that's because of the MCV move, of course. And like I said, YuiYui, he's not super worried about being efficient with his units. He's just worried about straight up killing his opponent. That's all he wants to do in this situation, is just kill Dankal as quickly as possible. So it's not necessarily like the battle of micro and super efficiency like you see in other Other times in Red Alert 3, you instead are just seeing more of just brute, do whatever it takes to win. And in this case, it's worked and it hasn't worked for YuiYui. So YuiYui might actually be taking a little bit more damage on these Javelin Troopers than he would like. However, it looks like the Prospector may actually be able to get the kill on one of these Javelin Troopers as well. He is able to gun it down, but that multi-gunner turret is going to be taking down the Prospector as well. And YuiYui, I mean, he's got no refineries. He does have the oil derrick, but that's quickly going to be gunned down by Dankal. It gets finished off right there. We've got wonderful somersaults and also a mecha bay going to be going down for Dankal, but also that refinery, which would have been his third refinery, but it's actually currently his second refinery. The MCV does pack up and move, and of course he's going to have to rebuild that power plant eventually, because that will get targeted down quite quickly by YuiYui. As you can see, YuiYui throwing down an additional refinery, while his first refinery actually taking down the power plant, and he is, of course, going to be focusing down the ore refinery of Dankal. But Dankal has cleaned out the oil derrick, and he's also kind of ensured himself that there's nothing going on this half of the map with YuiYui. So he knows exactly where YuiYui is, and that's, of course, in his old main base. YuiYui does have this oil derrick here, which is quite annoying for Dankal, but it's not certainly the end of this game. As long as YuiYui doesn't have this refinery and Dankal does, Dankal is going to be in an all-right position. So, YuiYui has been kind of going for this turret push style all game long, and Dankal, identifying this, he's starting to spread himself out. So he's got a refinery over here on the right side, he's sending a refinery across the map, and I believe that one actually ends up in the main base of YuiYui, where the power plant still lies. So, of course, he's able to throw down turrets and then move his MCV and not have to worry about going into that low power mode, which is a great, great move for YuiYui. YuiYui is going to be getting out his MCV kind of across the map to the now, what would have been like a 4th base location, but I believe it's Tier 2. Yeah, Tier 2 just finished up for Dankal, so now he'll be able to have access to things like Chopper VXs, which do a pretty good job at killing MCVs, and of course a multi-gunner turret is going to be picked up here, and also the barracks is going to be going down. Of course, this can be for Javelin Troopers, Peacekeepers into this building, because this is actually a Tier 2 building, or a 2-story building, which means Peacekeepers and other units can actually shoot over walls. Although I think that wall is actually blocking the direct line of fire that it would be providing, that building would be providing. The multi-gunner turret does go down. The Dojo Core almost gets sniped. It does barely jump out of range, and actually YuiYui is going to be very careful about trying to run over stuff that immediately pops out of that mecha bay. The refinery does get established, so Dankal is going to be establishing himself all over the map, which is probably the best thing that he can do in this case, is just harvest as much money as he can and make it as hard for YuiYui to actually take him out. And that's actually kind of beneficial on this map, just because it's not super flat and open, which means it takes a little while for the MCV and other units to sort of traverse the terrain. There's some twists and turns. That means it's not super crazy tight, but it's also not super flat either. The Ore Collector does get picked off there. Dankal might have been able to pick off one of those Javelin Troopers. I mean, in the end, that turret, that Harvester was going to be going down pretty much no matter what way you cut it. But it does look like the Tsunami Tank for Dankal is going to be heading out, and also the Dojo Core is going to be making its way across the map. He could have gone for a couple of Tank Busters. Of course, the DPS on Tank Busters, especially mixed in with something like Tsunami Tanks, is really, really good. The Tsunami Tank is going to be finishing off that command hub. A good move there for Dankal. And now both of these players are on so low eco. YuiYui pretty much on 0. I think technically he is almost on 0. He does have the 15 credits every 2 seconds from the oil there, but that is soon not to be, as here comes the, I would imagine, Engineer. And the Engineer does pop out there. That Imperial Warrior is going to be getting the kills on the Javelin Trooper. Nothing really that YuiYui could do about that. The one unit that he was able to save, the Peacekeeper, who threw up his shield, and I mean, there's nothing that the Imperial Warrior and Bonsai Charge can do about that. However, Dankal is going to be getting focused, his MCV, by these Riptides as soon as they actually start attacking from YuiYui. A third one is going to be rallied over, and I believe he threw down a naval yard here-ish when he had his MCV deployed on the high ground. YuiYui still hasn't taken care of this refinery of Dankal's or the one on the other side of the map, which I don't believe he actually knows exists. And he does still have that one Peacekeeper left on the map, but also the MCV is going to be getting blocked off. Some nice control here by YuiYui, just using the Riptides to block off the path and the route of that MCV. But as you can see, burst drones are going to be coming in. The MCV getting dangerously low on health, and Dankal should definitely be running up to the ground if at all possible. He is going to be deploying to try to gain some extra armor. However, it looks like the cryo shot is going to be firing off. Dankal easily evades it, but he's also not going to be able to stop these Riptides, which are now on opposite sides of the MCV, and there the MCV does go down, but also the Riptide gets eliminated, and the Riptide does gain heroic status, and then the Tsunami Tank does gain that elite status from the Riptide. So kind of a nice trade of heroic statuses there, but Dankal also, very importantly, did get off the Tank Buster surprise support power, so he was able to grab 5 Tank Busters, and so that's going to be some nice DPS for him. YuiYui is going to be able to clean out this barracks, and eventually the oil derrick, as long as he doesn't get taken out by the tank buster inside of that building. However, the MCV from YuiYui is going to be getting focused down pretty quickly. He is going to be dropping down a building. We'll have to see if it's going to be an additional barracks or if it's going to be something else. I'm not sure what else it could be other than a barracks. However, the MCV is going to be moving, and Dankal has to make sure that he controls absolutely perfectly, because of course the MCV will be able to crush down the Tsunami Tank if at all possible, and Dankal is trying to just swing around with the Harvester to kill whatever ends up popping out of that, because if he loses this refinery, the only thing he's really got is the refinery over here, and YuiYui has been defeated. Dankal able to take that game, and of course with the Tsunami Tank and the Tank Busters closing in, there wasn't a whole lot that YuiYui could actually do. So I believe that just evened things up with 2 points apiece. These two players getting extremely tight and close here in the Grand Finals best of 7. So I believe that was game number 3, which means game number 4 is going to be coming right up. But of course, YuiYui did start with that 1 point. So see you in just a little while.